So let's say the world only has one single objective, and that single objective is to make the entire Earth green again. That is not an easy task, but there is one enemy that can do a great job, and a lot of people are very compassionate about this enemy, and that is invasive species. Now, let's say you have this issue here where you have this, really tough area to grow. There are better species to cover this wall than Ecuador has. So there's no local plant that will do the same job as an invasive species that will take over this entire hill. So if you plant this invasive species against this hill and it takes over and fills everything up, and then it gets the idea to spread to the next hill, and then to the next hill. The seeds travel, and so on. The Ministry of Transport did that in southern United States with the kudzu vine, and it took over. And we have to take a step back and say the kudzu vine did its job. It prevented those slopes from coming down. It did a great job in protecting the soil. So it was implemented to do a job. It did the job. Okay. In Iceland, they had these areas that were turning into desert, very bizarre deserts. And a scientist in the 60s, I think it was, brought lupin plants in. And these lupin plants have done so well. They're great nitrogen fixers. They've basically conquered this entire desert area, and now in between these lupins they're going to plant trees again. So they're going to reforest all these desertified areas. It brought up a lot of uproar because certain birds were affected by it and all kinds of other things. Let's say the objective is to get the entire planet covered with green matter by 2050. Plants are very peculiar, and I'll explain it. There is a plant for every situation. There is a plant for every illness. There is a plant for any architectural issue, being protecting slopes or mechanical issues. There is a plant for everything. So if, and I'm not saying this is what should happen, I'm just saying, if the world, governments and municipalities and whoever, if they applied these plants that have specific functions in the world where they're needed, at the moment where they're needed. Bamboo. Bamboo is very aggressive, but it has a very peculiar, it produces more oxygen than any other plant because of its massive leaf surface. So if we ignore, and I'm not saying we should, I'm just saying if we ignore the invasiveness of plants and we move on to the next project. So we're protecting slopes with the kudzu vine. We're getting rid of the problem in Iceland with the desertification. And we leave that as a check mark. That's completed. That's been done. We have other areas that have problems. We move on. So we ignore the effects that are associated with an invasive species, and we move on to the next area. And by doing that, sure, it's going to be lots of controversy, lots of outcry, but the earth is getting green again. There should be governmental assistance for the propagation of bamboo, for example. That's where the energy should be, is we need plants that have this aggressiveness to be applied to areas where nothing else works. And when nothing else works, the sacrifice of using invasive species to cover the planet might be acceptable. I know a lot of people are going to scream at this, but I'm just saying, if the objective is to cover the earth, then invasive species probably is the easiest way to go. So green equals invasive species that have a specific function to make the planet green again. China's using licorice. They're making these 1 meter squares, and of course they're turning it into a profitable business by planting fruit trees in the middle. But whatever it may be, if you use foreign, out-of-place species, there is a very good chance that these invasive species will do much better than the original species that are from that location. So my prediction is in 2050 that endless amounts of species that don't belong in a location will be in those locations for project-specific applications, being it retaining walls, being it retaining slopes, be it getting rid of desert, containing sand, be it protecting rivers from eroding banks. Whatever the application may be, there is a better plant somewhere in the world that is more suitable to fix that specific problem. Is it going to bring additional problems with it? Yes, of course. You're going to have really odd problems that are going to be associated with this. I think a lot of the invasive species protesters that are protecting the environment, they have a double-sided sword. They are worried about flora and they're worried about fauna. Now, let's say we use invasive species to get 72% of the world covered with green matter again. And all of a sudden now, these crazy environmental disasters are slowing down. Tsunamis, hurricanes, whatever they may be. So they're slowing down because the Earth is regenerating itself to normal levels, and we're getting the weather to be a little bit more normal. So the economic loss by tornadoes and volcanoes or whatever it may be, hurricanes, does it outweigh the species that are being affected by invasive plant life? That is a big question. Like, there is a mathematical formula when you're using invasive species to protect the planet. Sure, it has really nasty side effects with fauna, but in the long run, is the human race better off using invasive species to get the Earth completely covered again? And I know there's going to be a lot of people saying this is crazy, but I'm just saying it might be worthwhile looking into this, because the Earth is losing green matter at a rapid pace, and the invasive species could and surely would make a huge difference because they have no enemies. They basically flourish outside of their own territories. Some of them work really well on terrible soils, clay soils, highly compacted soils, soils that are moving in the wind. So nature has given us plants that do everything, and there's a solution associated with every plant, if it's medicinal or if it's, anything else. And maybe for humanity to save itself by 2050, maybe this idea of using invasive species, and I'm talking now also about fish and animals, and these invasive species might be the food source that humanity is looking for. Just look at all the wild boars in the United States, for example. They're not being used for meat as much as they should be. They should be like supplying, it should be a gourmet delicacy to have those wild pigs, wild boars as meat in the food chain. So all I'm getting at is, my rant is about including invasive species to improve the food supply, to improve our weather, to improve reforestation efforts, to improve making the Earth a green planet again. So I'm not saying I'm in favor of it. I'm just putting the suggestion out. that invasive species might be the only saving grace that we have to make our planet work again.